Are you ready to take your business to the next level? Every day there are countless books and articles that are published offering the key on how to make your business a success. It's easy to feel overwhelmed trying to keep up and run your business. That's why Deb Creer created the Business Power Hour. Keep up on the latest trends, best practices, and techniques for how to make your business a success. Let the Business Power Hour do the heavy work for you.
Good morning, good morning. I am Deb Creer, and I am passionate about giving professionals the tools that they need to make themselves and their businesses as successful as possible. And we frequently have guests on who talk about business subjects, as in how to get SBA loans, how to do your website, how to do social media. But to me, your head and your mental attitude is the most critical part of being successful in business. Because if we're not right in our heart and in our head and in our heads, and I did the gesture backwards, we aren't going to be successful, truly successful in business. And so please join me in welcoming our guest today. So hi, Sallie Wagner. How are you doing today?
Fabulous. Thank you for inviting me today.
Great. Well, let me tell people a little bit about you and then we'll dive into this. So Sallie Wagner is a #1 international best-selling author, sought-after speaker, What's Next Strategist, and Life Alchemist. As a Life Alchemist, Sallie's powerful transformational tools include emotional freedom techniques, evolved neurolinguistic programming, and trauma-aware modalities to launch clients into action for rapid, concrete results. Clients reclaim the power of conscious choice in their lives and discover and live the life that makes them come alive. Sallie is also a lawyer and a real estate broker. She spends the majority of her law career in the corporate world. In addition to her other business initiatives, she is currently providing broker and contract compliance services to real estate brokerages. She also owns and operates a real estate school. And I'm not exactly sure when you sleep, but again, Sallie, welcome to our program.
Thank you so much.
Great. Well, you do have a very wide and varied background. So tell us how it is that you got to where you are today and how you discovered that, for now at least, what your passions are.
Yeah. So I took the scenic route. It wasn't a direct way. And, many years ago when I was in college, I started in physics, ended up in theology. So it was kind of physics to metaphysics. And that was going to be the trajectory to become a professor and all those fabulous things. And then I got distracted. I went to law school. I did all those things that we're supposed to do. And somewhere along the way, I ended up starting a couple of businesses and I still had that, is this all there is? That successful discontent feeling, and so I reconnected with the other side of things that I wanted to do in terms of helping people and coaching. And I had worked with people with EFT, emotional freedom techniques, for about 16 years. And so I thought, I love that. And as I'm working with people in real estate and building their businesses, I see that a lot of what's holding them back is limiting belief and limiting decisions based on that limiting belief. And that's what the life coaching does. It addresses those kinds of beliefs.
Those nasty little voices in our head,
exactly.
Right?
Yeah, I call it the snarky 6-year-old.
You can't do that.
Yeah, we have all these fabulous goals and affirmations, right? And then we have the snarky 6-year-old who's going, yeah, you wish. What are you smoking? In your dreams, all those kinds of messages that we tell ourselves. And so I just added to the skills with the EFT, the NLP, the trauma aware, to really be able to address people and those beliefs that are holding them back.
Right. I think that in the last couple of years, obviously people have really been doing a lot of deep thought about their careers, I'm going to say that COVID was trauma to everybody,
Yes,
whether you got it or
absolutely.
not. I mean, it was just this whole big thing that happened, especially because we went to work on Friday and on Monday we were home.
Yeah.
And you might have, 2.5 kids underfoot, and a spouse, a partner, all sorts of things. And we didn't know what was going to happen. And I think that's probably one of the biggest things of trauma is we just don't know, and in many cases, we didn't do anything to cause it. So talk
Right.
about the last couple years and how you think people are really dealing with this.
It absolutely is trauma. And I have a daughter-in-law who is a child therapist. She works with children and,
Oh
older
gosh.
children as well. And when this hit 2+ years ago, I asked her, I was like, this is PTSD, right?
Right.
And she said, absolutely.
Mhm.
And people do have that trauma, and it's trauma, it's grief, it's all kinds of things. We've lost expectations for
Right.
how life ought to be,
Mhm.
right? And as you say, nothing that we did, it just happened to
Mhm.
all of us. It's a collective trauma,
Mhm.
and we see it playing out on the world stage. We
Mhm.
see it in the statistics about drug abuse and suicide and all kinds of things that are happening in the
Mhm.
world, and children being held back with
Mhm.
learning, and they're not on the milestones, and it's trauma.
Mhm.
And I think for the large majority of people, it's not being addressed.
Right. Right. And of course it doesn't help that we still don't exactly know what's going to happen.
Right. Yeah.
I love it. Every once in a while somebody will still say, "I can't wait for it to get back to normal." It's not going to be like January of 2020, no
Right.
matter what. Whether it's that we got used to working from home or doing all of our networking online or, all of these various things, we're
Mhm.
not going to go back to January of 2020.
Yeah.
We might have some of that back, and I think we already do, and we're getting more of that. But yeah, I mean, the uncertainty is still there.
Yes. Yeah. And we don't deal well with uncertainty,
Right.
right? We
Yeah,
want
even if
that.
it's bad news, okay, we can deal with bad news. It's
Yeah.
this that we don't
Right.
deal with.
Right. Yeah,
Mhm.
exactly. Just tell me. Doesn't matter what it is, just tell me, and then I know.
Right.
So it's that not knowing, that
Mhm.
uncertainty that is very unsettling
Mhm.
for us. And we can all be very mature and
Mhm.
enlightened and say, oh, it's an opportunity to rethink all of these things. And yes, that's true.
Mhm.
However, we can't discount those feelings of trauma and
Right.
loss and
Mhm.
grief that people are still dealing with.
Mhm. Right. So Sally, if somebody comes to you and they're in this I mean, walk us through, things that you would do to help them.
Yeah. Yeah. And just to kind of add on to the other, I mean, it's not just this ephemeral, amorphous sense
Mhm.
of grief and loss. A
Mhm.
lot of us have actually
Right,
lost.
truly lost
We've
people,
lost. Yeah.
lost businesses, lost,
Yeah.
all sorts of things. Mhm.
Exactly. So there's real loss there,
Mhm.
not just, and I'm not minimizing the other sense of loss,
Right.
but I
Mhm.
mean, we've lost people,
Mhm.
and we've
Mhm.
lost businesses and homes and all
Mhm.
kinds of things,
Right.
so the loss is real.
Mhm.
So the first thing is, let's just kind of do an assessment of
Okay.
where you are, what's going on, what are the limiting beliefs that you're telling yourself about the situation, because it's in many instances it's not what we don't know that holds us back, it's what we do know that's not true that holds
Mhm.
us back. And so we want to be able to identify some of those things, and so that would start with a conversation. And many times I teasingly call it a spot treatment, where we do maybe a half-hour session with EFT or NLP to really address the immediate need, so that people are in a better place to be able to consider all those things that they need to consider. So
Mhm.
that would be a first step.
Right. And I think we've got to get it through to people that there's nothing wrong or bad about having these feelings.
Yeah.
And saying, you know what, I need a little bit of help. is okay.
Yes. And I think sometimes the reluctance is this sense of, well, at least it wasn't as bad for me as it was for them.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a contest,
Right.
right? We're not seeing who has the most loss and the most grief and the most pain.
Mm-hmm.
Our pain is real, our loss is real, and it does no good to minimize it by comparing it to somebody else who may have a worse or a different situation. And so that's one of the first steps, to just let yourself feel what the loss and the grief may be.
Right. Yeah, and we can certainly feel all of that from a distance. You know, I'm thinking
Yes.
about, unfortunately, all of the recent shootings that have happened.
Right.
You know, I think everyone, to some degree, you know, feels empathy for the situation.
Yes.
You know, and you know, we feel bad for the parents, we feel bad for the survivors, all of those. And you know, it was funny. I saw something on Facebook the other day where somebody posted and they said, I look forward to the days where a flag is not at half mast, indicating that there'd been a shooting. And I thought, oh my gosh, you know, that's horrible. And unfortunately, that's kind of the way it is today.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's because of this collective trauma that we're seeing played out, and people don't know how to handle it. And we're not providing the tools that people need to deal with it in an effective way. You know, we're just, and I guess this is kind of how we just are. You know, we think, oh, just give it time and it'll be okay. Time doesn't heal.
Right.
You know, we can't just wait it out. It's how we use time that either heals or doesn't heal.
Right. Well, and time doesn't heal if things keep repeating.
Exactly.
You know, whether it's, okay, we have COVID number whatever now. I saw something the other day that said we have COVID 22. I'm like, really? What happened to 20 and 21?
Yeah.
You know? And, you know, and then we've got monkeypox. Oi, you know, that just, you know, and just all of those things. I mean, it is life. You know, we're not going to go through in these rosy bubbles of, oh, everything's hunky dory, but it is knowing how to deal with things like this.
Yes, absolutely. Because you're right. We can't just, you know, we're not like Peter Pan, just think happy thoughts and it'll all be okay. Right. That's not how it works. And you know, not to cast shade on life coaching, because I'm one of them. However, you know, mindset is not just affirmations and happy thoughts. There's a lot of hard work that goes into it. And that would include tools like EFT and NLP that can really help us get things down to a manageable level so that we're able to respond to circumstances rather than react.
Right. Yeah. And a big part of it really is that acceptance part. Yeah. It's okay to feel bad. It's okay to, you know, to be traumatized, you know, all of these various things, but to not wallow in it. You know, you and I didn't have a chance to chat before the program, but I was diagnosed with breast cancer in 2015. If it could go wrong, it did. I mean, you know, it's just been kind of one of those things. And, you know, and people are like, oh, and I'm actually still in treatment. I mean, you know, this was 6 years ago, and, you know, all sorts of things. And I've had multiple surgeries. And like I said, if it could go wrong, it did. And people are like, oh, you're still so happy and bubbly. That's the persona that I put out there, but I still have bad days. I have pity parties. And I tell people it's okay to do that. You just don't want to get stuck there.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. We don't want to be in that victim mentality. However, acknowledging the grief and the pain is not being a victim, right? That's part of the process. And I absolutely love what you said about a pity party. Do that. Everybody schedule it, put it on your calendar, you know, and whether it's an hour or 2 or 3 or 3 weeks, whatever it is, allow yourself that time, because that's an important part. You have to express that emotion. We can't just pretend it's not there.
Right. Right. You know, and I find that sometimes some of the absolute strangest things will bring me to tears.
Yeah.
And I know it's not okay, oh, wasn't this this sad commercial on TV? No, it was just something that my brain all of a sudden went, okay, enough.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's the thing, when we're not dealing with it, and sometimes even when we are, it's going to leak out in ways
Right.
that seem odd. But, we have these triggers, and whatever it is, a thought, a sound, a smell, especially. I remember my first husband passed away almost 18 years ago. And in that first year, oh, how difficult, and smelling his cologne, his aftershave, was devastating. It was like, don't open the bottle,
Or if somebody walked by you and smelled like that.
Yeah. And that's normal. And I think in previous generations, perhaps previous times, we were better about dealing with it. In the old days, and still in Europe, some places they will wear the black armbands to indicate that they're in mourning.
Right.
And so the tradition was wear it at least a year while you're in mourning. And now we expect it to be instantaneous. Right. Somebody said to me after a couple of weeks after my mother had passed, "Oh, you're still sad?
Yeah. What's wrong with you?"
Sad. It was sad, of course. And yet there's this expectation that we should just get on with life.
Right. Yeah. And so we put on those brave fronts and break down at the weirdest times. We yell at the person at Chick-fil-A, or we cry, when a little kid goes by, anything and everything.
Yeah, exactly. Because we're not processing it in a, I hate to say methodical, but kind of a systematic way. And so it's going to come out at weird times and in weird ways.
Right. And as you said, sometimes years later, I remember my father, who passed away several years ago. He fought in World War II. And now he wouldn't talk about it to me because I'm a girl, and you don't talk about stuff like that to women. But I remember one time he had this very odd look on his face. And I said, "What?" And I could, there was nothing that it wasn't like something happened. And I thought, he was a tank sergeant, and his battalion was one of the first ones into one of the big concentration camps to liberate. And so and what had happened was whatever he had smelled triggered that odor memory. And it really was, he said, this was 40 years later, probably. He said, that is something that never will go away.
Those smells, the fragrances are so powerful.
But good things too. I mean, like when we hear a song that we remember, right? And so and that's just part of how we survive in the world, is those, and we can't, of course, tamp those things down.
Right. And so that's why, we have those triggers, a lot of triggers. Right. And that's where things like EFT and NLP can come in handy. They can kind of take the edge off the trigger. It's not going to make it go away. You're never going to be happy about a loss. It's still going to be a loss, and there's still going to be pain there. And yet we can, as I said, bring it to a manageable level so that we're able to respond.
Right. Well, and part of that is then in remembering the good things. Divorce might be, a situation where, it was, you're remembering how bad it was at the end, but, at some point it was good, or you probably didn't get married.
Exactly.
And so, you it's okay to remember those too. And you're not betraying anything either. I think that's sometimes what people think is, I'm betraying this. And same thing goes with like job losses and all of those. It's all, it brings weird emotional things in.
And job loss is a big thing. And, because I think a lot of people have experienced that. And it is a grief process because you lose part of your identity. You don't know who you are anymore. maybe because, you think about, you had that support network at work. You had your work friends, all of that tied up with your identity. Same, when you're in a relationship and it ends, whether by death or divorce or whatever, and we lose part of ourselves. And so that rebuilding process is to rediscover who you are, rebuild who you are. And as you were saying, remember the good things, honor the good things about that person, so that you're not betraying them. You're honoring their memory, because when you remember the good qualities about them or about the situation, then you're able to express them in your own life. And what better way to honor them than by living out those good qualities.
Right. Well, and I think about women, who say, I'm bad at picking men. I always pick a bad partner. And all of those negatives that come into it. I mean, again, I think there is something positive about them. And maybe it was just you liked how they looked in a pair of jeans. I mean, but there was something that was there. It's not that you're a bad judge of character.
Right.
And so, I would imagine, that you work with people to show them, okay, now here's the good. Let's continue that. What are those good traits? Let's carry those forward.
Yeah, exactly. Let's extract what the good characteristics are that you are looking for, and let's figure out if there's I call it a mind app paradigm, because we all know what apps do on our phones. Right. So we have, I imagine we have the same kind of thing running in our subconscious mind. And so those mind apps get triggered, telling us, look for a certain kind of person. Well, where did that app come from? Where did that programming come from? So maybe we can dissect it a little bit and tweak it so that as we move forward, we're making different decisions about the kind of person we want to attract.
And we all have the woulda, coulda, shouldas, and so how do we get past focusing on regret to really be looking forward?
Yeah. And when we're in trauma, and all of those things that we've been talking about, it's really hard because there's so much regret there, all those if onlys, if only I'd done this, if only I hadn't done that. But the trauma and the regret keep us looking in the rearview mirror. The way
I know, I love the analogy of the rearview mirror is little.
Yeah.
The windshield is huge.
Yes. And yet how many of us focus on that little slice that's looking backward, and the way we can begin to shift our gaze looking forward is to start building resilience. And there's some really simple things we can do to build resilience. We probably have this misconception that people are either resilient or they're not. And that's not true. It's a skill, just like a lot of other skills.
How do we even realize that there's a problem? Because, like we've been saying, we've been taught, be tough, get through it, all of those things. So how do we know when we need help?
Just kind of notice what you're noticing. Where are your thoughts going? Are your thoughts constantly going to a particular situation, a particular thing in the past? How are you living? Are you living in the present? Are you looking forward to things, or are you, comparing to, well, it used to be like this and it used to be like that. I mean, we know people like that, right? That they're so caught up in that identity of the person who is the widow, or the person who lost the job, or the person who, and that's who they become. And so again, the mindfulness, notice what you're noticing about your thoughts. And as you think something, notice what feeling you have about that thought, because, our thoughts determine our feelings, and our feelings determine our actions, and our actions determine our results. So if you're not able to, because this takes some practice, right? If you're not at first able to discern what your feelings and your thoughts are, look at your results in life. Are you engaging in activities with friends and family? Are you involved in your community? Are you doing things that are healthy for you physically? All of those things that are indicators of resilience. Look at the results in your life and then trace it backward to what are those thoughts.
Mm-hmm. Well, and it really is about our mindset, and so, tell me more about how you work with people to really help them. If somebody comes to you and says, Sallie, I can't get over the fact that my company went under.
Right.
What do you tell them?
Yeah. So lots there, right? Because we do have so much of our identity tied into our work
Mm-hmm.
and our careers and our businesses. And so we're going to go back to the root causes of what's your sense of identity?
Mm-hmm.
Where do you get your sense of worth? And it's a series of questions, and those questions are tied into some EFT and some NLP techniques. And one of the main questions is, who are you when you're not doing what you do? When you're not busy being a parent and a child, a spouse, a partner, an employee, a business owner? Who are you when you're not doing all those things?
Well, and I'm guessing a lot of times people say, I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. Because we're not taught to ask those kinds of questions. And yet, I think it was Napoleon Hill who said the quality of our lives is determined by the quality of the questions we're willing to ask. And so we need to be willing to ask those kinds of questions to get to, who am I? What are my values? What do I find meaningful and important? And that really ultimately doesn't have anything to do with what I do in the world. It has to do with the kind of person I am. And so when we can reframe our sense of meaning and value and our sense of self-worth, then we begin to have a different perspective on the company that went under.
Well, and we also talked about the fact that so many people are actually thinking, I've been doing X for 10, 15, 20, however many years, and now maybe I should do something different. I mean, I think that's been the biggest thing that has happened during the pandemic is so many people said, So, walk us through some of those changes. And I mean, it's so scary to even be thinking about it, but knowing I got to do something different.
Absolutely. Because the nature of work appears to be changing, and the way we think about work appears to be changing. And there's so many people who are like, I'm done with this. I'm going to do my own thing. And so we have a totally different sense of economy and what that means. So again, we're going to start asking questions. And I get that there is the practical aspect of, we got to do what we
need a paycheck. We need money. Insurance.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. All of those things, so I get that there are practicalities, and I've been there. I spent most of my career in the corporate world, as we said in my bio. And yet there came a time when it was like, I'm starting my own business, and that's scary. I know. So it's not like I'm just, up on a cloud someplace and theorizing. I've been through it. I do it. I help people with this. And so first we look at the practical aspects of what are you going to do to pay the rent?
Right. It is one thing to say, "Ooh, I need to make a change," but if you ain't gonna eat tonight, that could be a problem.
And I heard someone say recently, we want to give, we want to be generous, but share from your table, not from your mouth. So we got to figure out first what's going into our mouths, where's that coming from, and then let's look at the other things about it, like Maslow's theory. Let's think about fulfillment and what do I feel called to do in life. So I'm not discounting the practical aspects of things. And at the same time, I think we do have that capacity to look at, what do I really want to do in the world? What's my impact? And maybe my impact is, being the best cashier at the grocery store.
Right. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah. Because my mother worked for decades as a school cafeteria manager, and if I may, I'll share a little story.
Yes.
This was back, and I grew up in North Carolina in a small little town, and she worked at a school that was in a low-income neighborhood, to put it nicely. And this was in the days before they had the free breakfast and stuff like that. So one of the teachers brought a little girl in and said, she's late, she's hungry, can you give her something to eat? And so my mother did. She said, well, first let's wash your hands and face and brush your hair, because the little girl was kind of unkempt. And so my mother did that and gave her breakfast. Well, the little girl liked it. And so she would come in sometimes after that and ask my mother, could you help me wash my face and hands? And could you help me brush my hair? And, just stuff like that. And flash forward decades, my mother was running the homeless ministry at her church. That was her calling, it was, and a woman came in with some kids and she said, you don't know who I am, do you? And my mother's like, no. So we all know what the story was. It was a little girl, all grown up. And she immediately recognized my mother because of the
She was the kind person to her.
Yeah, exactly. She remembered, decades later, hey, that lady was in the school cafeteria and she helped me and she gave me food and she washed my face and hands. And so those kinds of things, we can contribute our impact wherever we are.
Right.
And so part of it is discovering where is that place for you. And as Howard Thurman said, he was a mentor to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Don't ask what the world needs. Ask what makes you come alive and go do it. Because what the world needs is people who have come alive.
Right.
And so that's what we're called to do. What is it that makes you come alive? And it's okay, whatever that answer is.
Right.
And then go do it.
Well, and maybe you have to work at the job you're not wild about because you need money, insurance, all of those things, but you're not doing it, hopefully, 24 hours a day.
Right.
So if you're called to, minister, okay, then you can do that. You can volunteer. I mean, there's so many other ways that you can be doing things. And sometimes it's just the matter of, we've been talking about mindset. Are you, my mother would love this. Are you saying please, thank you, and smiling? Yeah. Some of that just, I remember when we hear stories about this all the time where somebody, you smile at them, maybe they're the grocery store clerk, maybe they're whoever. And they're like, you were the first person who smiled at me all day.
Yeah. I mean, things like that. And we have no clue how it's going to impact people's lives. Like my mother and that little girl who grew up into a woman and immediately knew my mother because of the impact. Right. And so those kinds of things, and that's part of resilience, contributing to the community, giving back to the community, building a sense of community. There are 4 areas of resilience: physical, emotional, mental, and social. And that social resilience is so important. To feel part of the community. And going back to the work thing and people working from home and things are changing, we've lost a lot of that. Social.
I mean, the social is I think it's still hurting. I mean, obviously it was really concerning when we were in lockdown, and it depended, there were lots of variables, depending on where you were, did you have other conditions, all sorts of things. But I felt, that the children, I think, were probably one of the biggest ones, because to me, one of the most important things for school are the things like band, choir, socialization. And it's great to be able to work from home, But do you get your biggest flashes of inspiration when you're standing at the coffee maker with everybody?
Yeah.
I mean, all of those various things.
It's that interaction. And I just was hearing somebody say that recently, and Elon Musk had some posts about it recently.
Oh, he's in trouble. Oh,
Yeah, he's always in trouble, right? And yet, he has a very important point, but because it is that interaction with other people as we share and butt heads maybe, and, come up against things that are going to sharpen our ideas, that are going to spur those ideas, because you never know what it's going to be, right? And if we're working in isolation, we may be more productive in that sense.
Right.
And yet we're missing out on the creativity part.
Right. And I understand that people are concerned, about going back into work environments and things like that. And they've also discovered, oh, hey, I like this. I don't have that hour commute each way, especially now with the price of gas, right?
Yeah.
And, all of those things, I love the fact that I go days without putting real shoes on.
Yes, I know.
But I have not been to an in-person networking event since before the pandemic. I mean, February of 2020 was the last time I went to anything in person. So I do a lot online.
Yeah.
But I also recognize how much, now granted, I'm a real social person, but I miss seeing people.
Yeah. Yeah, that is a huge factor for us. And I think, certainly for children, they're more vulnerable. And, we hear studies and reports about how even their speech is delayed because of the lack of interaction. And sometimes when they are interacting, people are masked. And, there are all kinds of things that we're learning now about the lockdowns and the isolation in terms of the social component. Because it is important. We're social creatures, right? We want to be in community. And we've lost that part of resilience, a lot of us, because we've lost those opportunities.
Well, and now we have the fear factor that is in there. Going back and putting yourself in places like that. I went to a movie over the weekend, and it's like, how close are people to me? And all of those things. And, and I, other people are like, no masks, going back into crowds. I mean, all of those, and good for them. But, other people, and I think that's the other thing we need to understand is, what is somebody else dealing with? If they might not be up for the hug and the kiss on the cheek and all of those things.
Yes.
So how do business owners especially deal with all of this, with their employees? I mean, like, we're talking Elon Musk. I mean, what he announced last week was basically, you come back into the office or you get another job. And it wasn't full-time, part-time, hybrid. It was 40, a minimum. I liked it. A minimum of 40 hours a week.
Yeah.
You spend that in the office or you get another job.
Right.
Clearly he's going to lose a boatload of employees. But if you're the boss, I mean, how do you start trying to figure all of this out?
Yeah, I think it's a hard decision, right? And because people do have fears and concerns, and they're legitimate, and we can't minimize them. We can't go, oh, what are you worried about? It's not that bad. And yet for some people, it obviously is very bad.
Right.
So the fears can be very real. And just like everything else, we need to understand other people's perspectives, which we're not really good at. And that's part of mindset, to be able to understand other people's perspectives. Kind of like, the blind man and the elephant,
Right. Yeah. What part are you touching?
Yeah. Trunk, tail, tusks. They all defined it in a different way, and they were all right. And they were also all wrong, because their perceptions were limited, and our perceptions are limited. And we can have a greater sense of empathy, and a greater sense of resilience when we learn to understand other people's perspectives about things, and especially the fears and the concerns about health issues.
Yeah, I remember, early in the pandemic, I had come out of, a store and had my mask on, and my doctor said, you wear a mask. I'm like, okay, fine. I mean,
Yeah.
didn't matter what any government entity or
Sure.
whoever was saying. When my doctor said wear a mask, I wear a mask.
Yeah.
And so I come out, and this man, and I'm outside. I just hadn't had a chance to take my mask off yet.
Mhm.
And he looks me up and down, and he makes this face, and he says, you must be a Democrat. And I stopped, and my husband's like, oh. And I looked at the man and I said, no, sir, I am a cancer patient. And he literally took a step back, and he said,
Yeah.
I'm very sorry. And I said, remember that the next time you are critical to someone.
Yeah.
I don't know if it made a difference or if he went, oh my God, that wackadoodle lady.
Yeah.
But, it really was one of those things that, it just, and I, there have been several times where people have still said, I can't believe, you've had all your shots. I
Mhm.
can't believe you're still wearing your mask, and I guess my big thing is, if I'm wearing a mask, how is that harming you? I mean,
Yeah.
that really
Right.
is. And I think that's the thing, is we're not, we need to put ourselves in their shoes.
Yeah.
But at the same point, it's like, really, my mask is not hurting anybody. So,
Right.
maybe I'll wear a mask forever.
Yeah. And I think it's, unfortunately, it has become such a flashpoint and a
Mhm.
trigger
Right.
for labeling people, without that individual consideration of what are their circumstances. My daughter-in-law, her mother passed away
Mhm.
a year ago from this whole thing.
Oh
So,
my. Mhm.
it is real,
Mhm.
and they just had a new baby in
Mhm.
January. So when I was there, for a time I was wearing a mask.
Mhm.
My daughter's expecting later this month when I go
Oh.
to
Mhm.
visit. Yeah, very
Mhm.
exciting. 2 babies in a very short
Mhm.
period of
Mhm.
time. But, I'm going to be wearing a mask, I'm
Mhm.
sure, at some point, because health concerns are real,
Mhm.
and we all have different reasons for health
Mhm.
concerns. And
But
it's,
which may or may not be, I'm putting this in my little air quotes, right, but it's theirs.
yeah. And who am I to say that anybody
Mhm.
else's health concern
Mhm.
is legitimate or not?
Right. I might think, really? I mean, like the people, I had people who told me that, getting the shot, they were microchipping you.
Mhm.
And I looked at the one person who told me that, and I said, can I get the app on my phone so I can track my husband? Which, that was not what they wanted to hear. But
Right.
but yeah, it was, I don't happen to believe that way, but they do. So, I shouldn't make fun of it, and I shouldn't have.
Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes you just can't help
I
it.
know. And I really did say, you understand how much your cell phone tracks you, right?
Yeah. 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 I don't think they need to microchip us.
No.
Although,
And I tell people,
there are some places who are doing that, and,
mhm,
and nothing at all to do with the vaccine. It's just,
right. Mhm,
what's happening.
mhm,
I think there are a lot, and I'm not minimizing that
mhm,
concern, totally different concerns there, right? About
right.
privacy and everything
Mhm.
else.
Oh, yeah. Mhm,
And I think there are a lot of other more immediate
mhm.
concerns.
Right. And I tell people, it doesn't matter to me if you've had your shots or not. That's your choice. I don't care. You had your reasons for it. Doesn't matter to me. Just don't lie to me about it.
Right.
Because if
Yeah.
you haven't had your shots, I'm just going to keep my distance or keep my mask on or something like that. But I think all of that ties into trust. And so,
Yes.
how is trust a big part of how we're doing all of this?
Well, that goes into resilience.
Mhm.
And, Frances Fry had a fabulous TED talk about trust and the triangle of trust.
Mhm.
And she talks about empathy and communication and authenticity.
Mhm.
And when we're not empathizing with other people, to recognize that
Mhm.
they have legitimate health concerns, when we're not communicating
Mhm.
truthfully about their condition,
Mhm.
my condition, when we're not being our authentic self,
Mhm.
like, I'm just going to pretend that I got something and I didn't really,
Mhm.
or I'm, secretly I'm, questioning your judgment about your own health situation. When those legs are shaky, there's no trust. Trust either is absent or it's very broken, right? And when there's a lack of trust, it's hard to continue building resilience. Because a lot of resilience has to do with how empathetic are we, how authentic are we, how able are we to communicate with other people in an honest and effective way.
Right. So, when we're facing all of these challenges, how do we get through it? Is there a specific technique, especially if we know there's something very specific that's coming up?
Yes.
How do we deal with things like that?
Yeah. So EFT, emotional freedom techniques, is a fabulous way to do things like that, because it can be used in I identified three different ways, categories. It can be remedial in the sense that we're addressing an issue. It could be preventive, that we know a particular situation is coming up and we want to prepare for it. Or it could be aspirational, where, all of those fabulous new characteristics and goals that we want for our lives. And so I think techniques like that really get us centered and focused on what's going on internally are absolutely valuable for preparing for what may be a difficult situation.
Well, and I think we're all facing this. So that's why I'm curious about it. Now, we all have the ostrich thing, I'm just not going to deal with it. I'm not going to deal with it.
Yeah.
How, really, how do we, I've been watching a lot of the Queen's Jubilee stuff. So how do we, develop those stiff upper lips? How do we really start going forward in a positive, healthy way? I mean, we're not going to be Pollyanna. I've had people who've told me I'm Pollyanna. I'm like, oh, okay. But we have to be realistic. So how do we really start working on those skills?
Yeah. So I think it starts with mindset, skill set, get off your asset, MSG. I use that acronym. Mindset, as we've said, is not all about thinking happy thoughts. It's about gaining a different perspective, understanding that people have a different perspective. It's about being able to use our thinking skills rather than just having mental activity, because thinking is different from mental activity, right? It's about being able to focus. We're so distracted now with so many things, right? So being able to focus, that's all mindset. And building a positive mindset is going to take skills, and skills would include communication skills that I already mentioned. It would include stacking skills so that we have multiple complementary skills, like perhaps meditation is a skill, mindfulness is a skill, all of those things that are going to help build the mindset that we want to be positive. Because it is a choice. Ultimately, it's going to be a choice. What mindset do you choose for yourself? Are you choosing the mindset that is programmed into you, that is assigned to you? Or are you choosing the mindset that you have consciously chosen? And then the third part is skill set to take action. And taking action is a skill set, right? That's the get off your assets part. How many procrastinators do we have? And sometimes we think that procrastination may be a character flaw. It's not. It's a learned behavior, and we can learn a different behavior. So take action, take specific steps every day. That's important. It has to be a daily activity to move us in the right direction, to develop the skills that will lead to the mindset that we choose.
And it is, it is easy, like you said, easy to procrastinate, easy to hide, because we don't want to get hurt. Back to the little 6-year-old voice. I think a lot of times with the little 6-year-old in our head, it's also the adults, especially when we were growing up, right? That we're in our head saying, little girls don't do that?
Mhm.
Or, what makes you think you can do that?
Yeah.
All of those various things. And I think it's funny when we look at generational too, how we've got those. I mean, I'm at the tail end of the baby boomer generation. And, we really women had started going to college a lot, but I still remember people saying, oh, you're just going to go get your MRS degree.
Yeah.
And I was like, really? And even I had, in my, I'm like, no. But, I would think that that's fascinating from your perspective, just all of the different generational, because like, the baby boomers, we were told you work no matter what, you work
Yes.
until the day you die. And it doesn't matter if you like it,
Yeah.
you have responsibilities. And
Right.
then darned if we didn't raise these millennials who go, nah. And
Yeah.
then we scoff at them. Well, again, we raised them. And so how is it working with the different generations?
It's really very interesting, and I do have broad experience over many generations, and different concerns at different times of life, right? And it's interesting because we do have those generational programming and patterns. And so we want to address it at multiple levels. So it's not just messages that we've given to ourselves. It's messages that we pick up from others, family, society, culture, generations, right? All of those messages that really are constantly bombarding us about, you have to be a certain way and look a certain way and wear certain clothes and own certain cars and all that kind of stuff. And so we go back to that question, who are you? Another question is it important to you because you've decided that it's worthy of you, or is it because somebody told you it should be important to you? And when we ask that question, because there's a big difference right there, with that little distinction, right? When we ask that question, then we can begin to peel away the layers of that infinite onion that have been piled on to us and get to the core of what's important to us.
Right. So, the big thing is, we really, we need to know ourselves.
Yes.
And we have to have empathy for others.
Yes.
So now, okay, we know we should do that.
It sounds so easy, right?
I know. I'm just, I'm going to, okay, how do we start really developing those skills?
Yeah. So it's a lot of mindfulness, and because we can deceive ourselves all day long. We've heard of the 7 levels deep approach, just keep asking why.
And be that 3-year-old.
Yeah. Why? Yeah. That annoying little continuing to ask why. And for myself, I know I can deceive myself 7 layers deep all day long. And so we need to think of it as a continuing process where we never really get to the final answer, because it's a spiral, and we're gonna, as we uncover the layers of that onion, we're gonna have a deeper understanding, and then when we revisit the issue, we're gonna go, oh, that's interesting, because there's something else there that we need to address. And so it really becomes a daily practice, going back to that, it needs to be a daily system and a process that we're doing, and we just make it part of our, like we floss our teeth, we do mental floss too, to really begin to know ourselves. And things like EFT and NLP are such valuable tools in the process.
Right. Well, oh my gosh, we're almost at the top of the hour. So I know time just flies. I mean, it's always amazing.
Yeah.
So for the people who are going, okay, I need help, or if we kind of want to nudge somebody in your direction, right? How does somebody find you? And then what are the services that you provide?
My website is Sallie, Sallie, Wagner.com.
Okay.
You could also find me at intentionallifecoaching.net.
Okay.
And I offer, as I said, spot treatments. So a session or a bundle of sessions of EFT and NLP, combination of those, fabulous and very powerful. I also offer more formal programs. There's a bundle of 6 that I call it breakthrough and break free, where we get to a lot of those limiting beliefs and decisions and really eliminate them and begin to look forward in life again. I have a program that's called Reboot Your Thinking, how to install and uninstall mind apps. And then I'm also able to customize approaches for people because sometimes, we just want to address a particular issue and we move on because we're all good. So a variety of ways, nothing is just off the shelf. It's highly customized and individualized for people.
Perfect. I love it. And again, it's Sallie, I-E, Wagner.com and intentionallifecoaching.net.
Yes.
Well, Sallie, this really has been absolutely fascinating. And I can't wait to chat again. So we will have to stay in touch. Do you have any final thoughts that you want to leave everyone with?
Just give yourself the grace to be where you are. Again, we're in such an accelerated push with society, to get over things quickly and move on with life. It doesn't happen that way. And give yourself that grace and give yourself the grace of asking for help.
I love it. I love it. So cool. So cool. Well, I have been having just an absolutely fabulous time talking with Sallie Wagner. Can't wait to do it again. I'm Deb Creer, and until next time, everyone have a great day.
Tune in for our next program for even more trends, best practices, and techniques for how to make your business a success. The Business Power Hour, hosted by Deb Creer, is proud to be part of the C-Suite Network.